Countries around the world covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for the political correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is the political correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
You're watching GB News live across the UK, the world and our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We're here for you. Don't forget to join our community by hitting the subscribe button.
And download the GB News app so you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you. Email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
Very good evening. Welcome back to the programme. It is just after 20 minutes past 6. Thank you for your company. Let's bring you up to date with that breaking news that we brought you a couple of minutes ago, and that is that we've seen a further 183,037 lab-confirmed COVID-19 cases being recorded as of 9 a.m. today across the UK. That figure does include 5 days of data from Northern Ireland, but of course is way, way higher than any previous record we've seen sets, really large numbers indeed. The government said, though, that 57 people have died within 28 days of testing positive for COVID-19. Again, there are concerns that there will be a backlog in that figure given the Christmas break. Meanwhile, separate figures published by the Office for National Statistics today show that there have been 173,000 deaths in total registered in the UK where COVID-19 was mentioned on the death certificate. So that's a record number of cases across the UK today. We're not expecting any changes to rules and regulations here in England. Nicola Sturgeon in Scotland, of course, ruling out that there would be changes to the restrictions they've introduced until at least the middle of January. As always, do get in touch with us at gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet us at GB News. Let's move away from coronavirus, and a new report claims that 16 and 17-year-olds in care are at risk of being drawn into crime due to a social care system that is unfit for purpose. The damning report by the Commission on Young Lives are demanding a total reform of the current system to better protect those vulnerable teenagers who make up a quarter of all children in care. Whereas our West Midlands reporter Bhavinda Sidhu has been speaking to the former Children's Commissioner for England and chair of the report, Anne Longfields.
We've got is, in all kind of essence, an epidemic of teenagers that are coming to harm. They're being exploited, they're being targeted by gangs and those that wish to involve them in violence. And because of that, and because we are protecting them at the earlier stages, more and more teenagers have been coming into care. We've seen one of the biggest increase in teenagers coming into care that we've ever had. And almost a quarter of all children in care are now 16 and 17-year-olds. These teenagers coming in, they've often been living very vulnerable lives. They've been involved in violence. They've been targeted and exploited. They need a new kind of care.
The system, some would argue, isn't really doing anything for those young children it's been built for. I mean, we've seen the recent murders of Arthur Labinjo Hughes and Star Hobson, and it seems that the same statements keep being made over and over again, that lessons need to be learned. When are those lessons going to be learned?
Well, there is a review of children's social care going on at the moment, something that I pushed for some time. So there's an opportunity here to make improvements, and I really want teenagers to be high on that list. But there are some chronic themes going through the social care system at the moment. The lack of ability to identify early, the lack of data sharing, the lack of information, the lack of coordination with other agencies. And they're also stretched at the seams in terms of funding. The average cost of a place for a teenager at the moment is an eye-watering £4,000 a week, £200,000 plus a year. And there's many that will go up to £10,000 plus pounds a week. Now, that's a child who's fallen into crisis, that have very complex needs, that has escalating needs. Think what we could do with that funding if used earlier to protect those children from harm, to stop them falling into crisis, and also many more too. One of the things that we're really keen to look at is how we can develop new foster care models that actually could be really much better served for young people. Youth workers, for instance, if we could attract youth workers, train them up to be foster carers, they understand young people, they'll be able to build that relationship. That would cost a fraction of what we're now seeing.
What is the solution then? I mean, you've already mentioned a better foster care model, but what else do you think needs to be done to protect vulnerable teenagers?
I'd like a new teenagers' social care system, if you like. I'd like it to really concentrate on understanding and recognising when teenagers were at harm early, and working with those families to wrap support around those families. We need a kind of ring of protection for those kids so the exploiters can't get to them. If they do have to go into care, then I want a really different approach, local foster care that can actually work with families.
That was Anne Longfield speaking to GB News a little earlier. Now, the protesters from Insulate Britain who block roads and glued their hands to tarmac have cost taxpayers more than £4 million in the last 3 months. That's how much the Metropolitan Police have spent on trying to police these protests between September and November. 4 other forces spent more than £300,000 combined. Insulate Britain wants the government to pay for the installation of all UK homes by 2030 in an effort to combat carbon emissions. Well, we can speak, or we did earlier, to Kevin Hurley. He's a former Detective Chief Superintendent of the Metropolitan Police and the former head of the London anti-knife crime operation. He was in little doubt about his opinion on those protesters.
It's utterly selfish what these people are doing, self-indulgent, retired for the most part, egotistical, middle-class people. And they're all barking on the same tree that everyone else believes in. We know we've got to deal with climate change. But all these people are doing is taking our police away from protecting those who need it most. And by that I mean vulnerable missing people, mentally ill people, women suffering from domestic violence and abused children. Very, very selfish people. I think the time has come where police should be starting to look at indulging in buying water cannons, as Boris Johnson once did, before they were blocked by Theresa May. Because whilst these people are not particularly violent or very difficult, there are lots of groups police now confront are extremely violent, and we end up with these terrible scenes of police fighting and battening them, officers being investigated for months, if not years, people injured on both sides, when in fact a good washing down and being sprayed out of the way would quite often resolve the problem with minimal injury and a few allegations against police. So I do think we need to move beyond thinking of the good old days, because dealing with people with buttons and shields and helmets, and I've done it, is extremely violent and nasty. You don't see much of what goes on the camera, particularly when it's in the dark, but both the sides get hurt. We need to stop that, and water cannon is actually quite a modern way of doing that. There is a more unpleasant side of this, that this has also been a driver behind the government bringing in quite oppressive legislation to all of us with our right to free speech, and it's going to be slipped in over the next few months where everyone's right to demonstrate on other issues is going to be quite restricted now. So these selfish people have damaged all of us and damaged all of our own right to demonstrate as we see fit.
There you go. That was Kevin Hurley, a former Detective Chief Superintendent. Now, the Royal Mint has designed 2 new coins to commemorate the Queen's Platinum Jubilee celebrations next year. 2022 will, of course, mark Her Majesty's 70th year on the throne. The 2 coins are a 50p piece and a £5 crown, both featuring a portrait of the Queen designed by the artist Jodie Clark. A Royal Mint spokesperson said that it is a fitting that the historic anniversary is being commemorated on a 50p coin, as it is Britain's most loved collectible coin, if you did not know. The Jubilee celebrations will be a welcome distraction, of course, for Her Majesty following the loss of her husband, Prince Philip, earlier this year. Well, the royal correspondent Angela Levin says the Queen was unusually open about her emotions during this year's Christmas Day address.
I think it was very emotional, and it was very interesting that she did decide to open up. And I think, in a way, it's an attempt to answer the hurt she's experienced this year. She would normally have ignored that, but I think the pain has been enormous from Harry and Meghan. I think she's been shocked to the core, and it must have upset her tremendously when Prince Philip was dying in hospital, and she had this extra anxiety to concern her. But she's not going to give in, but she wants you to know that she hasn't brushed it aside. And I think with Prince Andrew too, who is a real favourite with her, that she feels this is all very draining. But, you know, she likes to be positive. She wants us all to be positive.
Harry's getting involved in books, other kind of projects, Netflix, all the rest of it. Have you been surprised, nay, depressed, as I have been, at the speed with which he's gone about, I would say, arbitraging his royal status for enrichment?
I think it's horrific, actually. When I spent well over a year with him when I was writing his biography, I thought he was charming, charismatic, instinctive, masses of positive things, but you could see a dark cloud came over now and then, and he was mischievous. He always got involved with the baddies. He was very easily torn.
Is that what she is? Is that what she is?
I leave that up to everybody else to make an exercise. But he was always there for mischief and to be naughty and counterproductive, really. And I think that he's now turned into somebody who is incredibly nasty and spiteful for the sake of money, because he's not going to get millions and millions unless he gives them something very powerful. And this memoir that he's got coming up, which is an investigation of what happened to Diana, we believe, he's bound to attack his father and Camilla. And actually, I think he will do a lot of damage to the royal family. Prince Andrew doesn't feel like a lot of us feel about guilty or wanting to get it sorted. I think he manages to wipe these things out of his mind, particularly if he can go horse riding. You know, he's a man who sort of brushes things away. We saw that after Newsweek, that he'd made a catastrophic interview, and afterwards he'd told his mother that it had gone really well. You know, so if you've got somebody like that, you can't make a judgment with your own idea of what's right and what's wrong. But I think that today's news is that he feels that it's not right that a United States jury and court case can actually help for somebody who's living in Australia, because she's lived there for nearly sort of several years now. I don't know exactly.
And for some people, that will feel like he's trying to wriggle on the
yes, but it won't get rid of the dark cloud. No. Not for a second. You know, all these technical things where people win cases, they don't actually get rid of what the problem really is, and that is something that they've done, but they've just got away with it. And I don't think the public do like that for anybody.
There you go, Angela Levin, royal commentator, speaking to Colin Brazier a little earlier. Let's just bring you up to date with those figures, that record-breaking 183,000 cases reported in the last 24 hours across the UK, 57 deaths. Just to say, of course, this is a picture that's been replicated right across the world. France reported 208,000 cases and 53 people in intensive care, 184 deaths today. Italy's new count hit nearly 100,000, 98,000 cases on Wednesday. Denmark also seeing a record number of cases, along with Portugal, Australia, Greece as well, which is talking about introducing new restrictions. And in a report published, they said of all the new COVID infections of all variants grew by 57% in Europe in the week before Sunday, and by 30% in the Americas. So large parts of the world, most notably in the United States and Europe, but also in Australia as well, seeing record number of cases of coronavirus, mostly being driven, of course, by the Omicron variant in recent days. Different countries, of course, imposing different restrictions. We see that here in the UK, where we've not seen any new restrictions introduced after Christmas in England. That's not the case, of course, in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. OK, we're going to pause there on GB News Live. Coming up next, a whole lot of other news, including, you won't want to miss this, Tequila Fish. I'll explain what that's all about in just a couple of minutes. Stay tuned.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Very good evening. Welcome back to GB News Live. The time coming up to 20 minutes to 7 o'clock. Don't forget, Nigel Farage is live on air at 7 tonight. But before that, let's take you through a few of today's top news headlines. And that is that a further 183,037 lab-confirmed COVID-19 cases have been recorded in the UK as of 9 a.m. this morning. That figure does include 5 days of data from Northern Ireland, but is still considerably higher than the previous record. The government also said a further 57 people had died within 28 days of testing positive for COVID-19. Separate figures published by the Office for National Statistics also earlier show that there have been 173,000 deaths registered in the UK, where COVID-19 was mentioned on the death certificate. Meanwhile, doctors have advised the Prime Minister that 90% of people being treated in intensive care have not received the COVID booster. Speaking at a vaccination centre, Boris Johnson said that 2.4 million double jab people hadn't had the booster. He's urging them to get the jab so they can enjoy the new year. Latest figures show more than 800,000 boosters were recorded across the UK during the 5-day Christmas periods.
And I'm sorry to say this, but the overwhelming majority of people who are currently ending up in intensive care in our hospitals are people who are not boosted. If you're not vaccinated, you're 8 times more likely to get into hospital altogether. So it's a great thing to do. It's very, very important. Get boosted for yourself and enjoy New Year sensibly and cautiously.
Meanwhile, in Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon says she won't introduce further coronavirus restrictions because hospital cases have remained broadly stable. The First Minister says she expects a steep increase in cases over the coming weeks. Scots are also being urged not to travel to England for New Year's celebrations, where clubs, of course, are still open.
And it's also why over Hogmanay and New Year's Day, and for at least the first week of January, we are advising everyone to stay at home more than normal, to reduce contacts with people outside our own households, and to limit the size of any indoor social gatherings that do take place so that they don't include people from any more than 3 households.
Of course, this latest massive record-breaking number of cases is not just confined to the UK. In France, 2 people are testing positive for COVID every second. That's according to the country's health minister, who also said that France had reported a record daily high of 208,000 new cases. That's up from 180,000 on Tuesday, while the World Health Organization's Director General says he's becoming increasingly concerned by the increase in global cases.
Delta and Omicron are twin threats that are driving up cases to record numbers. I'm highly concerned that Omicron, being more transmissible, circulating at the same time as Delta, is leading to a tsunami of cases.
In other news this hour, more than 100 cases of harassment and stalking have been reported in Parliament since the start of last year. The figures come from the Met's Parliamentary Liaison and Investigation Team, which was set up following the murder of MP Joe Cox. It recorded 117 cases between January last year and September this year. And jurors in the trial of Ghislaine Maxwell have been told that they will have to work on New Year's Eve and New Year's Day if they haven't reached a verdict. Minutes after arriving to begin deliberations today, the judge confirmed the trial would continue through the holiday period. Maxwell is on trial in the United States, accused of luring young girls to be abused by Jeffrey Epstein, charges she denies. Now, let's move back to the top story, and that is, of course, the coronavirus crisis, because pharmacists are warning they're struggling to get hold of enough rapid COVID tests following changes to self-isolation rules. Demand for lateral flow tests increased after the time people with COVID had to spend in quarantine was cut from 10 to 7 days in England. A UK Health Security Agency spokesperson said that almost 8 million test kits would be available to pharmacies by New Year's Eve. Meanwhile, the debate goes on as to whether the amount of time people do spend in isolation could be cut even further in England to just 5 days, where, of course, that is what it is in the United States. It increasingly looks like the pressure on the National Health Service in England is being caused as much by staff shortages as it is by the number of COVID patients. Well, earlier on GB News, a former NHS nurse and barrister, Rebecca Butler, was asked if Boris Johnson's resistance to further restrictions was the right thing to do.
Not only patients that suffer, it's also, the mental health of people in the community. It's also the economy. And I think, in a way, Boris does seem to have taken a real political gamble here, but I can't believe for a minute that he's taken a gamble when the numbers and the data seem to suggest that there's going to be a major problem. And as I said, we have the epidemic in the under 40s at the moment. If it does, switch into the 60s and 70s, then he might have to bring in other non-pharmaceutical interventions to suppress the spread. The current situation in hospital is brilliant, but if you have nurses off, you then have to shut beds. So those same cancer patients, where there is a crisis, absolutely for sure, they could suffer delays in treatment or having, their chemotherapy started or their radiotherapy started purely because staff are off sick. I think, Boris's political message has been, be sensible. Well, maybe now is the time to look at being sensible. If you're symptomatic, you're clearly not going to go back to work. But is 5 days going to be better than 7? Well, yes, I suspect it is, providing you feel well enough to do it and your viral load is down, as you can demonstrate with a test. So it is about being sensible and using your common sense. And I think Boris has actually led the way in being less autocratic, less sort of dictatorial about how we are to live our lives with coronavirus, and handing responsibility back to people and saying, just demonstrate common sense. I'm very much for vaccination. I've trained as a vaccinator in the pandemic, so I'm very much for vaccination, but I am also for pro-choice. And the issues you're raising really are something that have been, discussed in the NHS for years. Should smokers get treatment for cancer? Well, of course they should. Should drinkers get treated for alcoholic liver disease? Of course they should. The NHS is for everybody. We don't turn around to a footballer on a Saturday, a sort of a minor league footballer, and say, "Sorry, you smashed up your knee, and it's your fault." We don't deny them health care. So I think we must be careful not to alienate those who have chosen not to have their vaccine, because a lot of them have done it for entirely legitimate reasons. In their own minds, they are concerned, they're scared about the reported side effects, and they feel it's been rushed through. I think it's about being gentle and kind with them, not mandating it, because even if you mandate it, I suspect those people won't have it either.
And in sports-related news, there's calls for the World Darts Championship to be postponed. The reigning champion Gerwyn Price has called for the tournament to be postponed after a number of cases have been linked to the event. Dave Chesnell, who has become the latest player to withdraw from the tournament, he tested positive today. Mr. Price wrote on Instagram that the tournament needs to be postponed. He said that, "I've been in their position, so I feel for the players that have had to withdraw. There's a lot of hard work gone into getting events like the World Championships on." So he argues that postponing probably isn't the best option, but an option I wouldn't disagree with. Time to keep myself safe and out of touch. Keep safe all. So suggestions there that the World Darts Championship, of course, taking place at Ali Pali in North London, should be postponed. Number of players testing positive. Well, let's move away from coronavirus for maybe a slightly light-hearted end to the programme. Have you ever heard of Tequila Fish? And no, it's got absolutely no relation to the alcoholic beverage. The freshwater fish living in the lakes and rivers of southwest Mexico were facing extinction in 2003, but thanks to conservationists at Chester Zoo, more than 1,500 are now back in the wild. Well, to explain more about this project, delighted to say that I'm joined by Dr. Gerardo Garcia, curator at Chester Zoo, who joins us now. Thank you for joining us. Very good evening to you. Just explain, first of all, what's distinctive? Give us a sense of Tequila Fish.
Right, initially, probably the tequila split fin probably doesn't look very charismatic and charming. It's a small, little, tiny little fish. We're talking about around 5 centimeters length, a little bit silver, a very shy fish that lives between the reeds and the river systems in Mexico. But it has a really charming, unique biology, which is they don't lay eggs. They just give them birth. So the females produce a very small number of small, tiny little fishes that spread around. So these species that are just unique, that family living in Mexico, it becomes the focus of the conservation, which is one of the most threatened species of freshwater fishes in the world.
And we were just saying there, weren't we, that they were facing extinction, and this was because of primarily water pollution, is that right?
Yes. Unfortunately, this is a kind of a common thread that you find all around the planet, and they are affected as well. So pollution, obviously, these systems are really overexploited and probably sometimes not really well cared about the communities, and not understanding what it could be the impact in the long term. Then other consequences like the introduction of other invasive species of fishes. Again, with not knowing what exactly will be the implications of having that species in the wild, affected that the species is slowly being reduced to a small little number of populations to extinction, unfortunately.
And just, you guys have clearly done incredible work here. Give us an idea of what you've been doing at Chester Zoo to try and preserve these little charismatic fish.
It started many years ago. We're talking about probably around 20 years, when this species probably wasn't too much on the radar of conservation. And we was only a few individuals left in private collections and in small aquariums. Some of these individuals become the founder population in Mexico. So they were sent to Mexico around 20 years ago. There they start keeping a very large collection of rare species of fishes, only unique for Mexico. And it was around 10 years ago when these populations we're talking about more than 40 species of endemic fish. They were just living in aquariums pretty much. We start thinking, well, this is not enough. We can't just simply accept it. The fish are going to live in aquariums. We needed to put it back to the wild. And this is when we start having these projects. We start talking with the university in Morelia, led by Professor Omar Dominguez. And we decided that this is a long road. This is going to be a long journey, but we're definitely determined to turn around the situation on extinction and also improve the quality of the ecosystems to the communities and the fishes. So 10 years later, we start talking about reintroductions, and there is a lot of layers of planning before you can really go to the end of what, could be the first of the celebrations about the species bringing back from extinction. So there's a lot of stages you have to do before you can really say, right, fish go back to the rivers.
It's extraordinary, isn't it? People say, oh, there's plenty more fish in the sea, but actually there's a hell of a lot more fish in our lakes and rivers than there is in the sea when it comes to marine biology. We should probably change that term that we bandy around sometimes. I suppose from your point of view, there's criticism, isn't there, of zoos? In fact, I was in Chester Zoo only a couple of weeks ago. It was very fun, but a lot of people feel uncomfortable with the role that zoos play in locking animals up and the small confines that they find themselves in. Is this a kind of story about how zoos are also really, really important, not just for conservation, but also about helping to save species and reintroduce them into the wild?
Absolutely. There is many roles. There is not just probably the iconic one that we're talking today is releasing back animals to the wild, but is a wide range of roles that the species are playing in our collections. Is applied research that is required, that is unique, because the species sometimes are very secretive, are very difficult to really study in the wild. This is an opportunity here. This is the connection with the communities, the engagement you have with wildlife conservation. You cannot have it even closer if it is not in a zoo and an aquarium. So we play that role of research, conservation, and when we have to do it, which is very sad sometimes that doing these interventions, but that is the very last hope that we're doing. And this is what zoos and aquariums are doing, habitat protection, working with the communities, research, policy. All this is the role of different species. Today, we talk about tequila splitfin, but we're talking about protection of habitat. It could be a native species, could be exotic ones. So the role that we play is very diverse, and it's a species per species. So it's a very complex game, but we're really working in the same direction to preventing a species from extinction.
And just finally, Doctor, what are you looking at next? What have you got your eye on that needs saving? What's the latest project?
Well, we continue with the species. That this is a big family. That we're talking about more than 50 species in just that family. But we're talking about endless above projects where we have projects from South Asia. We're talking about the Caribbean, Latin America, Africa, Madagascar, and also in the back garden from us as well. So we don't just go to abroad. We have a lot of native species here as well, like in UK. From butterflies, from plants, from all different range of species. So the project is wide, and we have so many regions that we needed to work with. So today we're working in all different range, all different continents that we needed to work with. And it's always the same thing. It's just build capacity in country, sharing skills, and engage with the communities that, is part of the solution as well.
Fascinating stuff. Dr. Gerardo Garcia, curator there at Chester Zoo, saving the little charismatic tequila fish. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Happy New Year to you and all your colleagues up there in Chester.
Thank you.
There you go. Pretty extraordinary story, isn't it? OK, well, that is pretty much it for this hour. We'll have the very latest on those record-breaking coronavirus figures, 187,000 reported across the UK. At the top of the hour, Polly will bring you the very latest news. That'll be followed by Nigel Farage. He's on between 7 and 8. And I'll be back at 8 o'clock tonight. So stay tuned to GB News Live. But first, let's bring you up to date with the weather from the Met Office.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello there. Another mild day tomorrow. Still windy with some spells of rain, but some brighter breaks, particularly to the lee of higher ground towards the northeast. Low pressure firmly in charge. However, it's the wind direction which is determining how high the temperatures will be tomorrow. And we could see values coming in around 12 to 15 degrees Celsius, but it will be windy everywhere.